Hello viewers, a pleasant morning to each and every one of you. I am Ron Grant coming to you live and direct from Tortola in the beautiful British Virgin Islands. Mental Health Awareness Month is observed in May and covers the mental well-being of all. Its purpose is to raise awareness and educate the public about mental illnesses such as persons who suffer from depression, schizophrenia, and of course bipolar disorder, the realities of course of living with these conditions, and strategies for attaining mental health and wellness. This year's theme is Tools to Thrive during COVID-19. Now, of course, continuing this series, joining me to discuss mental health awareness and the youth of our territory is mental health consultant at the Wellness Center, Mr. Jovan Cline. This is a conversation you don't want to miss. We've always said that the youth are the future. Well, it's time for us to protect and nurture them, beginning with their mental health. All this and so much more after a word from our sponsors. You're watching 284 Media.
The win.
What are the health
I'm freaking out.
is about these people?
It's always a pleasure coming to you live and direct from the
What's poppin'? What's really good?
Davis has won it for the Lakers.
viewers. Welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. Mr. Jovan Cline, welcome back to 284 Media.
Thank you for having me again, man. I always love coming through.
Most definitely. Now, you are a mental health consultant with the Wellness Center, but you have been working for a very long time with the youth of our territory, specifically school-based programs. When we think of mental health awareness, where are we from your vantage point when it comes to the youth of our territory?
Ron, I think we're actually making some progress. There's a lot of work that needs to be done, just considering where we're coming from as a culture, where we're coming from in terms of our understanding of what mental health actually is, canceling out some of the stigmas that we have, canceling out some of the fears that we have. We have some ways to go, but we have made a lot of progress, especially with the new age of thought that we can all access. That's not just based on who's immediately around us.
Right, wonderful. Now, when we think of the state of mental health, you mentioned, of course, culture. What aspects do you think work for us and perhaps even against us culturally as it pertains to mental health awareness specific to the youth of our territory?
That's a good question. I'll start with the things that work for us. Definitely our culture of small village or small community togetherness. It works for us where we have people that we can reach out to, where we have a familiar face that we can see when we're walking down the road. We feel known, we feel seen when it comes to being recognized or being understood. When you look at bigger societies, it's kind of difficult to see people or find a lot of people that can say that they have somewhere that they feel a part of, or they have a group, or they have a village that they're ingrained with, where they can go down the road and hail up this person and hail up that person, or get something from this person, get something from that person. We live in a society where just about everyone is our neighbor, and that's something that definitely works for us. Things that work against us, coming back to that small community mindset, the negative side of it is that we often want to seem better than we are.
Wow.
We often want to seem like we are always okay. We don't want to stand out as being the individual or the person that is weird or unsure or afraid. So because of that, we hold a lot of things in. Because of that, we operate, at a certain pace or go along with certain ideals or mindsets that we are not necessarily in agreement with at the time, or, we operate like we're in a stage of life that we're not necessarily in. And that causes some strain and some pressure and some stress that really has an effect on us. And we don't feel like we can reach out to someone who would understand, because again, everybody else seems to be along that same boat in the small setting that we have.
And speaking of having someone to reach out to, when you look at the youth of the territory, what are the avenues for them locally available for those who are suffering with mental illness in the territory?
Now, professionally, we have a variety of options. Of course, we have the Wellness Center that, doors are always open for parents and young people to reach out. Within our schools, we have our school counselors.
Yes.
We have other private organizations that offer therapeutic services, talk services, stuff like that. We live in a place with so many churches, and finding the right minister to speak to. It doesn't have to be the head of that church. Finding the right minister to speak to within a church, kind of gives you a good lift. And even if you just break it down to the basic social day-to-day life, in many communities there's that grandmother or that grandfather or that aunt or that uncle that you can reach out to. We have a lot of elderly people who, luckily for us, are able to see us grow. So when they see us taking a certain path at times, they're able to point something out to us and say, hey, you've changed, or hey, I'm noticing this about you. You look tired, come for a glass of water. Things like that, even though a bit rarer in these days, they
Agreed.
still do happen. So those are good things. Yeah.
Wonderful. I want to talk about exposure. Believe it or not, in such a small community, just like you mentioned, we sometimes try to ignore the level of exposure that our young people are open to. Speak to that and its impact on their mental health.
The topic of exposure is something that I stress on a lot when I speak to young people. The scary thing about the level of exposure that young people have is how quick the accessibility to the rest of the world has happened. Whereas, let's say a few years back, if you were to experience or witness someone dying, that would be cause for you to get therapy, or it would be a major event.
Yes.
Whereas now today, you go on Facebook, you just turn on the news, and they're showing people dying. You can find horrific scenes, traumatic scenes, just at a few clicks. And these images, these videos are being exposed to young people on a daily basis, and it's really causing a lot of desensitization. And it's causing a level of stress that won't be noticed on an everyday basis.
Yes.
Because, the body knows how to cope, the mind knows how to cope. So when you're taking in something constantly, it won't always be shocking. But just because you don't feel the effects don't mean that there aren't things building up. So we're seeing a lot of young people walking around a bit more stressed, they're a bit more on edge, they're a bit more nervous or anxious to the wall because they have already been exposed to a lot of the dark scenes that are around in the wall. Unfortunately, even though the BVI is a part of the wall, we do live in a very, very protected space. However, with that exposure, your body is operating and experiencing conditions that are not necessarily true to your immediate surroundings.
Okay.
So while you live in paradise, you are living a life of anxiety and fear as if you are in a war zone.
Understood. I want to speak about the village that we often hear about. It takes a village to raise a child. But let's begin with the parents. What role and what encouragement? You have a lot of parents who are in denial, definitely, about the mental well-being of their child. Let's start there and speak to our parents.
First thing I'll say to the parents, I want to point out the difference in speaking terms when it comes to mental health, mental illness.
Yes.
Yeah. There are cases, like you mentioned, where parents are very much in denial about some real mental illnesses that a child may have, or even themselves. And I'll focus on themselves for a second because a lot of parents don't share as much as they could. And that sharing helps your child, that sharing helps your nephew, your niece, whatever the case might be, because they have now a perspective of understanding. This is who I'm coming from, and this is who I'm experiencing. This is what I'm dealing with. There are a lot of kids who really grew up thinking, well, my mother hates me, or this is how love is shown through abuse. This is how I'm supposed to interact with other people because this is how my mother does it, or this is how my father does it, this is how my uncle does it. So they grow up with a real skewed perspective of how interaction and what wellness looks like. Not crying means I'm okay. Not talking means I have it all together. So when as adults we don't share our own experiences and our own trauma, or take time to really recognize them for ourselves, we unintentionally most times pass on a lot of these ill practices of mental health and self-regulation to our young people. Now, on that note, what I would say to parents is, find time, of course, with your child when it's appropriate, based on age, based on when you are ready and when you have found the appropriate help to communicate these things properly. Find time to share with them. This is how I have experienced life. This is what I do want for you. This is what I don't want for you. Share.
Wonderful.
We have to get into
and having the conversation, because what I'm getting from you is what you don't confront, you will confront eventually, because persons, just like you mentioned, students taking and really internalizing behaviors that they see around them, but not understanding the depth. And not only understanding the depth, but the magnitude of what perhaps mental trauma their parents too may have experienced at any point in their life that would then allow them to behave in this manner. So we definitely have to start there with the parents. But of course, I want to touch on educators, the teachers who interact with these students on a daily basis. What is their role?
Patience. Let's start off with patience. We have to understand that our students are coming from varying households with their own experiences, into an institution, with expectations, with rules that they might not all be able to adapt to as abruptly or maintain as we would like them to maintain. So we have to be patient and understanding with them first off. And we have to find ways to teach our students to a way that they understand how to learn. The fact of the matter is, what worked a few years ago will not necessarily work today in the same way. So it's about us communicating with those students, these students that we want to teach, and helping them and ourselves understand how do we learn? What's the best way to set up a learning platform for you? How do you take information better? Because it's not going to be the same as we all have grown to appreciate or understand to this point.
Understood. For young persons in the community who may be watching, or parents and guardians of children who may have some mental illnesses, but also are struggling with mental health, particularly, what encouragement would you give to them, and how can we move forward to make sure that our youth are getting the help they need?
First off, to anyone who probably recognizes pay some attention to their mental health, I want to say first off, you're not alone. That's the first thing you need to know. When you seek help, it's very, very important to know that although this is a big step for you, you're not the only person taking this step. Secondly, there is help. You can find people to speak with. You can find resources. We talked about this big, vast resource of exposure, which is the internet. Even if you're not at a place where you're ready to talk to one face to face, there are resources online that you can find to just give you some coping strategies and so on and so forth. But the main thing I want to say, you are not alone. Secondly, there is help, and it's available to you, whether it's the Wellness Center, another private entity, or one of your community leaders.
Wonderful. Jovan, I want you to continue and ask one more time, when you speak of persons, tell us about the religious persons who can assist.
You have your ministers at church, whether it be preacher, pastor, reverend. You have your deacons. You have your youth leaders, and these people will vary, but they are in our communities. It doesn't have to be someone with a position. It just needs to be someone with genuine passion.
Wonderful passion and a care and consideration for the youth of our territory. Mr. Cline, thank you so much for stopping by. We do wish you continued success as you continue to do your part in really nurturing and assisting the youth of our territory. Thank you so much for your time today. Do have a good rest of the day.
You too.
Viewers, that's all the time we have, but that, of course, is not all the content. Of course, we're going to be continuing this mental health series later on in this week. We're going to be hearing from Dr. June Samuel, who's going to be covering mental health and our elderly. Of course, prior to this, you heard from Dr. Virginia Rubain and Dr. Michael Turnbull. We thank you so much. Be sure to tune in later on. We have a lot of content on our page. Of course, at 2 p.m., we have a very special interview that's going to be coming up. That's a podcast alert, a new podcast coming up. And at 6 p.m., I'll be bringing to you the daily happenings, both locally, regionally, and internationally. Of course, some of the headlines we're looking at include some 39 students that receive solar energy technician certification. Of course, the COI and the hearings continue to be major conversation. We're breaking that down for you. And of course, updated processing system as it pertains to the streamlining of our customs declaration. All this and so much more. Do have a good rest of the day. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.